It's already operating. Yeah, it's a report as soon as you start.
Oh, well, the
No, then our next.
Okay. With the 535.
There you go.
All right, so if, Becky or George, if you guys want to start off with anything that we need to run through the finances?
finances,
Yeah.
okay. So I think I sent them out yesterday. And I guess when you look at the balance sheet, the biggest change is that during the month of October, we did get in a payment towards the tax levy, actually a pretty substantial payment. Got in $4,128,512, which is about 94% of the total expected tax levy. Last year in October, we only got in 68%, and then we got another disbursement in December. So it's a little bit quicker this year, which is good. So the short-term investments, the money came in, and within 3 days, it went up to be invested in the IntraFi account at MVP. So that's why the short-term investments went up so much. I don't think there was anything else too remarkable on the balance sheet, but since we're on a cash basis, when the money comes in, it immediately gets recognized as revenue. And then our unrestricted net assets go up by, in this case, about $3.8 million. So a little bit less than the cash came in because of our expenditures throughout the year. Any questions on the balance sheet? Otherwise, if we flip over to the statements of revenue, expenses, and changes in that position. So there's the tax levy coming in, and miraculously, that's exactly what we had in the budget. So there's no variance, and there won't be a variance at any time during the year. And that wasn't good prospective accounting. That was the money came in, so I make the budget the same, so we don't have a variance, because otherwise it just introduces, a variance into something that's really not going to happen. So other revenue was a little bit favorable. I think we were relatively conservative when we budgeted revenue, and on a year-to-date basis, we had the grant that wasn't budgeted. Salaries continue to be favorable. I look at them each pay period, and they're very consistent. I think you said you had at least one new hire, all right? Or
Yep, one so far just came on board this month. We have another 3 coming on in December.
Wow. So that will probably change, but even with 4 people, it would still probably run closer to budget. The things that I noticed, and I didn't really have, professional fees are a little bit unfavorable. I know that during the month they were unfavorable because we got hit with the investigation costs, and I don't know if there was anything this month, if it was investigation or some audit fees went in there. But if not that far off, I don't know if you lost it.
Oh, was
Well,
it the
the
take-home?
investigation was only $453. The regular September fee was $1666. The investigation was $453.
Well, maybe if we can just look in the general ledger, of course, that's the check register, which isn't fixing the prior years.
Yeah.
W-2s.
Oh, they were fixing, yes, and they had to fix Social Security, so there was a larger bill than expected for Paylocity. We had something in the system did not take Social Security from one employee. So they had to go back and amend all of the 941s and create all the new documentation, which cost us a base fee of $5,000. So they created all of that information, and that was the charge that they put in there, because it went back 3 years. 3 years.
So they didn't do social security right, so they fixed it and charged us $5,000.
It wasn't their fault.
Oh.
It was whoever put the person on board, somehow let them become exempt. So,
Really?
yeah, so it was either the employee or the person who onboarded the employee. We can't see it in the audit trail from where it is. So one of those two people did put the person in as exempt, which only happens normally with our pages because they're college age. So they usually are exempt from our tax. This person got exempt from Social Security somehow. That's how we traced it back. It's been turned off. It can't happen again.
And then did we have to pay employer portion of?
Yes.
FICA? Okay, so
That's what they did.
that's
They,
probably why the fringe benefits maybe are a little bit unfavorable, even though that's
Yes.
favorable. I think workers' comp had a little extra expense in
Yes.
there of like $4,000, but okay, that's interesting.
yes, they did pay both portions. So we are getting repaid by the employee on a monthly basis.
Okay, so it's the fees to fix all of the prior tax filings in there.
And the employee and employer portion, yes.
And then I think building maintenance was a little bit unfavorable, but not significantly. Technology, I think you said it before, you had the $6,000 startup fee for the new payroll service in there, right? Which was at least part of it. You must have bought some equipment.
You said 5,000 for the new switch over to the payroll, 6,000.
6,000, yeah,
And the technology number?
Yes.
that would be right, yeah.
I believe that's where about that too.
Do we know if there's any particular big expenses on the building maintenance?
We had one large repair to our cooling tower. It's in the check ledger. Is that the $3,000?
Yeah.
It's one of the last ones.
Was it on this page? I remember seeing it for the teller too. I know you talked. right?
Here we go. Is the charge on the check register for $2,699 rebuild existing cooling tower pump?
Yep.
So, yep, that was a repair to our cooling tower.
What would have happened to it?
If it broke, it controls the humidity and the temperature. So we wouldn't be able to we wouldn't be able to open the library and it would probably damage the books if it was off for an extended period of time. It would be worse in the summer months for humidity.
We keep more bookshelves.
I think the interest was up a little bit this month because, and the budget went up as well. But with the money that came in, it would have done that and everything. And I think that the money was only in the account, it got into the IntraFi account on the 21st, so we only had 10 days of it. So next month, we should see the interest bump up quite a bit more, I would think. 10,000-ish more maybe. So, we should see that bump and the budget goes up a little bit as well. So overall, I guess, on a year-to-date basis, we're very favorable. The month was a little bit closer to budget because of some of those items. But still favorable and everything. I mean, I didn't see anything really way out of sync on that. Any questions on the report? The investment report's there, but the biggest thing is all the money that went into the IntraFi account. I think maybe one CD swapped out and was replaced with, can't remember if it was the Web Bank. And basically you can kind of see the older CDs are at higher interest rates and they're coming down. So the last one we did, I think was about 4.55, which is exactly what the IntraFi account's paying. Yeah, there wasn't really much change on that at all. Details are there. And the check register, I mean, yes, I always look at it, I still continue to be amazed, although there was some exploited think there's so many line items for health insurance. All right, and I do see now there was an audit or something on workers' comp, so the expense I did notice was up a little bit higher during the fall.
Reason we get all these bank statements is, again, what should we be looking for on this?
So I think the reason that you get them is, it's just, you know, it's funny, I talked to the other Tim at, who was it, Tim Burke maybe at,
Watson?
yeah.
Tim Burke, yeah.
I guess we're just down to one Tim now. Peak out at three and now it's, but he said that you should distribute them just to show the physical existence that they really are something supporting the numbers. They're not exact. I always go down and look at them and say, oh, well, we say we have X amount and the bank says we have more, and that's a good sign because of the outstanding checks. But it's really just to provide evidence to the board. Evidence is not a good, to provide
Transparency.
document, yeah, just that, you know, there is those actual
Be
balances.
helpful that when you hand these out, you say they're there, but there's
Right.
nothing in it, because it's sort of like a haystack of information that I look at and I say, am I supposed to like do due diligence on this?
I mean, I look at it and just, you know, make sure, every once in a while I look directly on NBT Bank just to, you know,
Right.
you know, I don't think that anybody would go through and create bank statements and everything, but worse things have happened. I think I've seen worse things happen, but
Don't say that, because, yeah, please.
yeah.
The 941s were worse enough. Please, no.
I'll have, after the meeting, I'll tell you about the only time we had to restate 941s. And it was a pain in the neck.
And that's why it was, we were glad they provided the service, and like I say, they went ahead, they filed, they told us how much each portion was gonna be, so it was
So
great.
does the employee have to pay in their share?
Yes,
They probably weren't happy about that.
they knew it was coming, so, you know,
Yeah.
that's what we did, we made a payment plan with them.
We made the best of it.
Yeah, we did what we could.
Then again, should have noticed it maybe or something. It's like they get pay stubs.
We kind of thought that too, but what can you do?
Those are the statements that'll be presented Thursday.
The workers' comp audit by Utica Insurance, that was, I think it was in September, so they finally built that out, but they did contact me to get all the information, so they did perform that audit. So that's why they finally built this out.
We had, just because it stands out, the aquarium guy in here twice within 10 days.
Yeah,
Did he visit within 2 days or did he just pay him? within-
I think we paid within 2 days, yeah.
Okay,
Was that-
we paid him twice within 10 days, but his visits were separated.
Sometimes they don't bring the bills in, and other times they bring a big stack of bills.
Yeah.
Did, I'm just out of, where does everything stand on the audit right now?
That's a very good question. So, the auditors got the legal letter and they were happy. And because it's so old, they have to do some due diligence from the time the year ended. My God, I can't even, I mean, we're talking 6/30/2022 up through current. So they got check registers from the fiscal people and they made a selection. I just saw what it was and there weren't a lot, right? Maybe half a dozen, four? Yeah, okay, there wasn't a lot. So I don't know if those gone. So I hate to say, I think it's getting closer, but I think it is. We still haven't seen, I think we agreed that I would sign a rep letter and I think you're gonna sign a rep letter, even though you weren't here, but
I'll take accountability for it, sure.
Are Are they doing like an audit for multiple years right now?
No,
or
they're just, they wanted to
One.
finish, they
Yeah.
wanted to finish the one before they talked about the other.
Do we think we're gonna be able to kind of catch up and
So,
get
I
us
mean,
back on track of where
I
we're
was
supposed to be?
hoping they could do two at once, sort of, and coordinate that and do that maybe before next June so that we're caught up. Because it is,
I'm
I mean,
sure.
it's not the worst thing in the world, but
No,
I think
you know,
when
it
people
feels like
asked
at
for it
some
during
point,
the
we gotta
thing.
like, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
get it so we're not a full year behind where
Yep.
we ought to be and back on track of just every year's audit.
And I guess I would, and, you know, I will take the blame that it's so late. As long as you give me the credit for, you know, $500,000 that we kept by, you know, by going through that whole process and everything. I don't really mean that, but it's just, you know,
Yeah.
it took way longer than I would have expected, and a lot of that was on us and the auditors. I think they had it by last June-ish, I think, and they were gonna work on it in August, and it's just taken a
Yeah.
while, so. And I think once we do get caught up, I mean, I don't know how many years it's been that we've been with the same auditors, but I guess we would have to consider if we do wanna, you know, put it out to a bid and everything. And I have no overwhelming sense that we should or shouldn't or anything, but I think that, you know, it'll probably be at least 5 or 6 years by then.
2019, I think, was the first audit.
What year?
2019,
19?
5 years ago.
5 years, okay. I was thinking that was longer ago.
We know that because we've been digging through documents for Paycom to see when we were established way back in the 50s. The Gilderland Free Library.
Yeah. We use an outside service of any kind when we hire people for vetting people or
Like background checks.
background checks and then, you know, just headhunter type fees and stuff like that, or anything.
Headhunter fees,
No.
no. Background checks, yes. But yeah, we have not, that's something that actually, when we were investigating other payroll solutions, that's an add-on service that you could often get is help with recruitment.
So we do all our own hiring and evaluation and.
Yep.
Do you do background checks on everybody?
We sure do.
Yeah.
Talk about the cost, like 125 or something like that. Not terribly expensive.
You can't do it through the school district, can you? I know they have.
You know, we've never, to my knowledge, we haven't asked. I imagine they would probably want to keep it separate.
I didn't know if the fact that you were a school district library, if you were required to do it under the same, they do have to fingerprint everybody and
Right.
go through that.
I think, yeah, we don't do fingerprinting for our office.
Okay. Yeah, the smart checks. Check 33489. Smart checks was our last pre-employment searches. I believe that was 2 people, right?
That was 2, and we've subsequently been billed for 1 more. and I would-
2 Allisons. That was the one with the 2 Allisons. That's why it was funny. One had 1 L, one had 2 Ls.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, 2 Allisons.
In the past, it was just maintenance fees, we did pre-check
Yeah.
on drug checks.
Is it a criminal background check on everybody? You don't do a credit report.
We do for everyone, because I know I got a credit.
Yeah.
We,
It's the criminal too.
yeah, criminal and credit.
People shying away from doing credit reports.
We might, it might be a holdover from like how the way we've always done it. I can see a need for people who have fiduciary responsibility to get one.
Yeah, maybe.
It might not impact like every L1, you know, every library one rather.
Let's see, so finances check, investments, tax levy audit. All right, budget, we just kind of talked about. All right. Any other businesses that we need to bring up?
You know, we still have hanging out there the reserve fund proposal and, you know, whatever is gonna happen with that. I'm not exactly sure what are the next steps if we want to keep that moving forward.
I do. I think we should. I mean, we've already discussed it here. I thought the consensus was everybody was on board, right? It's just a matter of how much to put, or at least just start anyway, and then we can figure out.
Yeah, I guess, how do we, what's the, proposal to the full board of, what exactly, how are we defining the accounts that we're creating?
And was there a question about what we were allowed to do with the tax tertiary specifically? I remember we.
There was a
We-
question.
yeah.
And
But you had to
I
have
had
something.
had a question, but because I guess I didn't, I know that you had brought that up. I need to try and look into that as well. I guess the idea was that it was pretty limited on what we could put in there, but is that because I know that, they're I remember in the statutes, there are specific limits for school districts on what they're allowed to have for reserve funds, and they're very limited. They can only create reserve funds for certain defined purposes, and one of those is tax certiorari. And I'm assuming that's where those limitations come from for what's defined for school districts.
It was more of that you have to show that it's going to be there. You can't just assume. You had to have something that you could base on either historical or that you have knowledge that it's coming forward. There's a development that you think this is going to happen, which is probably something your local government would involve you in. Because if it's going to involve the school district having to pay back and you're gonna have to pay back a portion, then they're gonna keep you apprised of that, of anything that's gonna go to court about what the settlement's gonna be. So you'd be looking to say, hey, I've got this big development that now is gonna wanna lower their taxes or do a pilot, something that's gonna cost you on your tax base. So you couldn't just decide, I wanna put 10% towards tax tertiary without having a reason why. It's a just because. It would treating it that way is more like treating it like a rainy day fund. You didn't really have a purpose for it.
Yeah.
I guess I thought when we did it, you were gonna try to avoid making them, I hate to say official funds, but have board designated funds.
Well, that's what we're gonna do. The issue was and this is why I wondered, because we found out that the libraries are not under the same, governed in the same way with respect to reserve funds as school districts, where the school districts have only certain itemized
Right.
types of reserve
Right.
funds. We can have reserve funds for any purpose. So I wondered if there was a difference in terms of, because we can essentially have a rainy day fund. We're allowed to just have money, as we're supposed to, have reasonable, justifications for, why we're doing it, but we can have long-term reserves that we're saving up for, the
Building.
distant future for building, whatever, which are things that school districts can't so much do. They're not allowed to do. So we have, given that we are allowed to have these kind of contingency things for various things that school districts can't do, I wondered if that gives us a broader ability to save money for, covering us for the tax certiorari or whatever that might be beyond what a school district could do, given that we aren't governed the same way as a school district in this respect. So that's what I was wondering, but I didn't
deeper.
I didn't dig into it or anything, so that was what I was
It
wondering.
was the argument between what's a designated fund versus a reserve fund. Yeah, because designated, that's you naming where you want it to go, but you can change your mind
Right,
and reallocate.
Yes, that's, we talked, these being the board designated fund. And I wondered if that, like, do we have more freedom to, kind of plan conservatively to cover a potential, tax certiorari, even when we don't have, this knowledge, because we aren't governed by the same restrictions on reserve funds that school districts are. So if that's the case, then, I don't know what's the right amount of money that we want to, save, but, it does seem like if we can only put money away for, things that are, right around the corner, like almost on top of us, it does, a lot less, it's a lot less useful. It's a lot less helpful. It doesn't, it's only when we find out, in the next year, there's going to be, we get to save, a year in advance instead of the year it hits us or whatever. It doesn't really defray it that much. It doesn't really give us that much ability to really spread the costs. So.
It doesn't, so it's kind of a good idea to keep in touch with your town government and what's being built in your assessor and where you fall under it, if the school district is going to have part of it. So it's kind of between your assessor, your school district, and you. If they see something, hey, we're having this big development coming in and you know it, then you're probably going to get a court filing that they want to lower their taxes. You can pretty much guarantee that. So that becomes your basis of, hey, they're just building it now. That gives me how many years to work on it.
Yeah, I guess.
Are you thinking of just doing it concurrently, or are you thinking that when we put together financial statements for 6/30/2023 or 6/30/2024, that you would want to reserve anything? Or do you just want to do it now because?
Well, so, I mean, I think the theory is, right, that there's two parts to it, right? So one, we have some amount of money that's just, that we have in our current fund balance that's not designated, it's just unrestricted funds. So that's whatever we think it is, a couple $1 million that's in there currently. Some of that money we have to keep in there because we need to have, be able to cover the float the couple months, until we get our tax levy every year. So we have to have that buffer in there that we just, leave in there as our, just, giving us that float every year, so for the money. But the rest of that money, we could decide, well, let's designate that so it's not just sitting in this, in this
Right.
undesignated thing, but let's take that money and kind of seed these couple reserve funds and say, well, this is what we're planning eventually to use that money for. We're going to put it in these couple categories, knowing that if we need to dip into that for some reason, the board can, by a board vote, just take money back out of that if we have to. So we could split that up. That's like the existing money. But then the idea would be each year as part of the budget process, as we, work on our budget, we have all our various line items. Instead of just having a catch-all at the end, it's just like, oh, here's the balance term, and so that's just going to be extra money that gets thrown into the fund balance. We would say, hey, here's our three things. Let's designate that we're going to put some money in, for the, whatever our three categories are for, large capital expenditures, some for the eventual building replacement, savings, some for the tax certiorari, whatever our categories are, and kind of designate that so it's in those categories. And then we would just have those, and we could it would be, budgeted for in the budget, and it would show up in our financials. Hey, this is, if we ever want to look, how much money have we saved for these bigger expenses and things like that. Now, that's the theory. Some of these things we talked about for, if we're going to have one that's for kind of large capital expenditures, things that are kind of a little too big to absorb in a, 1-year budget, that we want to kind of spread the cost over, it's a replacement of a major system in the building or other things like that, that are just, things that are harder to absorb in a year's budget. That's something that our facilities manager, we want to get input, on, and, looking at, let's look at all the different kind of parts of this building and what are the expected useful lifespan of these various things and how long do we expect before we're going to have to replace this or that or whatever. And that might help us put some numbers on how much should we be saving each year so that when those expenses come due, we've saved for already and already have the money to go out the door. So that's a number that could go into that budget process to help inform that. Possibly, I don't know, the tax certiorari, that's a tough one, of getting any, of kind of knowing how much, I think there's it would be a lot of guesswork if we want to save for anything more than, the immediate future. But it's something, we could discuss, what to do about that. And then the building one, I mean, that's another big, question mark. It's, it's long in the distant future. Who knows, how much, but it's, these are things to talk about, and we can, every year when the budget process comes around, we'll be able to see, well, this is how much we've already put in this over the past X number of years. We already have saved in there. And, how does that compare with, the trajectory we want to have or what we think we ought to be, saving in these various things, whatever, and then take that into account. And that's the theory. But, the steps from getting from here to there is, what we're working on.
The net effect of it would be though, is, if you took this number, like $2 million for the funding of the working capital.
Yeah.
That's basically the net number you're talking about, split it up amongst 3 funds.
Yeah.
Then you get to next year's budget process and you look and say, well, I got this number and broken down into these 3 categories. I could ask for, if I ask for the tax cap, which is at 2.5%, you can go about 2.5%. I would get this much, but I don't need that full amount. I can ask for a lower amount. That's basically the net of,
Well-
the net of what you're saying.
In theory, that could be, if we wanted to, again, and I know there's, pushback against, taking any less than the max would, there's some, been push for saying, well, we shouldn't do that because it jeopardizes our ability to tax that much the next year and it's, whatever. I mean, one thing we could do is just, I mean, if we're still gonna, right? If we were still just gonna take the max of the tax cap, we do, like what we've been doing is saying, okay, how much is the max tax levy, taking, our previous year's tax levy and then applying the growth factor and the statutory increase. Here's our new number. Then we do all our line items that are there. And then whatever is the difference at the end, that just was went on the capital improvements line. And that was basically just a catch-all that just basically, was a buffer, but it also just rolled into the fund balance. And in recent years, that has usually been $200,000 or $300,000 is what's been in that line. I mean, the change that would be the minimal change from our current practice would be, we do all the budgeting exactly the same as we've been doing, but when we get to that number at the end, that's the leftover money and it's $250,000, instead of just throwing it undifferentiated into the fund balance, we say, okay, we've got $250,000 to work with. How should we allocate that between these several different long-term saving things? Let's throw this much into this much into that. And then it would at least give a little bit of transparency to the public about how we're thinking about using this money, what is planned purposes, and it would be there, but it wouldn't change the amount we're actually asking for. Now, in theory, if over time we saw the amount that we're saving in each of these categories for these long-term purposes, we're actually saving money kind of faster than we think we need to, or we're kind of stockpiling money, or whatever, we could say, well, this gives us the flexibility to say we can ask from the taxpayers less because, we've demonstrated that we're budgeting and what we're planning for, or whatever. Because right now, we know we have future expenses that we're going to have, but we don't have any numbers. We can't put any numbers on it. It's just like, well, someday we're going to have an expense that's going to cost us a lot of money that we'll need for something. And so let's just take all the money, throw it in a big pot, and then someday we'll use it. But this would be a way of saying, let's put dollar figures on this and try and, as best we can, kind of actually plan for how we're going to use this money. And if the result of that is us saying, you know what, maybe we really don't need to be saving quite as much as we are, maybe that would inform us to take less. But if that's not what it tells us, if it says, look, there's going to be crunches in the future, we should keep taking everything that we're able to take because we're going to need it and we're going to need to stockpile and kind of be prepared for that, then that's how it is. But I don't want to prejudge what's the right amount when really right now it's all guesswork. We have no numbers. And we've never had any numbers. It's all just been throw it all in a pot and eventually we'll use it for something.
Right, I would imagine this 2 million, I'd like to know what the history of that 2 million. Right now, we just got funded, okay? We're basically funded the working capital out of the thing and we're saved by the cavalry, the tax levy came in. What has that 2 million been historically? If you look at, if this is November 1st, okay, this is the end of October when all this settles out. What has been that number, Can we look back over Octobers and say, this $2 million number has gone like this, or is it?
Well, we know that,
is it
when we had
constant?
the construction project, we had, the bond issuance that was, how many million was the total?
Yeah.
Bond issue? But then we put
I
in
know,
1.4 million or something like that out of the,
yeah, I think.
so that came out of that fund balance. So we had 1.4 million more in there previously before that, but we still had $1 million plus in there. And then it has increased every year by a couple 100,000 because we've had budget surpluses, based on that.
So there would be if you look back, there's always going to be a capital project at some point that's going to suck up and take that thing down. So, but some historical perspective on this, I think would be helpful. If we could look at this, what this October 31st number is, and then look at what the capital programs have been and when have they come in and sucked it up, and is there some predictable rhythm on that? Because you're basically saying, well, we don't know what this is going to be, but there is maybe some historical perspective on how capital programs do suck this up, and then what does it build to, and it never really gets above this amount, and then it goes back in.
Well, I guess, one question I don't know anything, about the history of is, this building was built when, 1992, is
The
that right?
original building.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it was built in 92, so then, there was presumably in 1992, a huge bond issuance to fund the brand new building that was built here. And then we had the one just a couple years ago to do this major renovation. In between that time, were there any, like bond issuances or other major capital renovations that came into play, like between building the building and doing the big renovation that was, like a, not a, a very sizable, thing that would have caused us to draw down our thing or, to need to issue bonds or something like that? And
Yeah, we had the heat pump replacements and the loading dock.
And
We would always get grants to pay for part of it,
part of it.
but we did use some of our unrestricted monies to.
And anecdotally, we can certainly go back and look through the history, because I've been digging through that as part of the work with the facilities committee.
Yeah.
Anecdotally, like in 2008, we had to replace the skylight, and if we hadn't gotten an arbitration, it would have been about $100,000.
Yeah.
So, David mentioned a couple projects. We can go through and actually kind of find the history of the building
Yeah.
in financial terms.
Another piece that would be helpful on this is, do we have an understanding of, I would just in my head say per 1,000, what's $1,000 equal to a tax bill that a taxpayer gets? Okay, how do we understand that? I see sometimes when you talk about the school board or something like
Yeah,
that.
I know we had numbers of that, because it came up last year with the firefighter, the bill that was about that, and it was for every, it was what's the actual impact on, because the way that worked was for every person who was exempt under that would get spread on the other taxpayers, and we did the math on that, and that gave us, but I just don't remember what it was. I mean,
It was it was a really small amount. It was like less,
that one, it was tiny.
it was like 50 cents a person or something like that.
I
It
know,
was tiny.
but I'm just,
Yeah.
most of our expense, I mean, we don't have huge expenses here. I mean, if you look at this thing, it's, $10,000 would be too big of a number, so it has to be a $1,000 number. What's $1,000 added library expense mean to the $250,000 homeowner? Is that what it is? The median homeowner gets assessed this amount of money, and so when he sees this $1,000 ask, it means this much for him, and if it's a $250,000 ask, then it's that number times 250. And you can easily do that calculation, but I think that would be really helpful for people who sit on this committee, just want to know what's $1,000.
It wasn't a lot. I mean, we looked at it last year.
Yeah.
Because the percentage that the library gets out of the town is like a 0.0 something. So it ended up being like pennies per every $1,000. So it
I
wasn't
know,
a lot.
but that's something to keep in mind when we're talking about
Yeah.
these issues, is you say, the $250,000, per year, but how much is that really worth to a taxpayer? That's like.
When I did it on my own, like I put it in my own house and I did the numbers last year for mine, it was like $5, maybe probably less than that. It was because we have such a small percentage.
Well, what, do we know what the total for the school district is for a typical
I mean,
taxpayer? Because.
We can find out. I mean, it's all public record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our budget is like, 4 million and change,
Yeah.
and the school district is what, like 110 or 100 and, I don't know, what, do you know, Tony, it's somewhere around 100, it's over 100.
Yeah, it's something like that. I haven't,
You think, what is it?
it's well over 100. Yeah.
130? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can do the percent, so it means of the percentage wise, we're, 2 to 3% or whatever of the.
Right, no, I understand, but I also just like to see what, when we talk about this.
No,
the-
That's, it's worth, I mean, it's worth knowing that, and that is something you can, we can kind of
So
try and tell to the taxpayers when we're justifying like our budget and saying, look, this really is only a small amount per taxpayer that we're asking for. But people also do pay attention to the top line numbers. And if they see like these millions of dollars, that the library is in the budget, that we're asking for, and, we have economic downturn or budgets are tighter, things like that. And people see that even if it's only a small amount, those numbers still matter and people
No,
will
I'm not
vote
saying it
against it.
don't
on
matter,
the
but
thing.
everybody
No.
should sort of be informed as to
Oh,
what,
sure.
what that is in terms of how much are we really talking about.
yeah, I don't know if these numbers are right, but just Googling Gilliland tax, whatever, tax, library tax. Apparently the Ultimate Enterprise looked at it last year and it said for every $1,000, it's $1.02 per Gilliland resident, which is less than Bethlehem, which is $1.17, and New Scotland's $1.19. Knox is $2.19. So that's from the Ultimate Enterprise.
For 1,000.
For 1,000, yeah.
For 1,000 of
The tax rates for the Gilliland Public Library per $1,000 of assessed value
assessed value.
per 1,000 of assessed value.
So that's home value based on that, but that doesn't,
Right, it's a $250,000, median home, right?
so, well, yeah, I don't
We
know.
don't pay taxes on the full assessed value, though. We only pay taxes on like 70% of the assessed value.
A little bit too complicated for me. Sort of
Right,
understand
but
this,
if that number is based on the total assessment, like if that's how, and
Yeah.
it just has how the enterprise calculated it, they might have calculated based on the,
Yeah.
it's unclear.
But no, I think as we get into budget season, especially like having these numbers in our
Yeah.
back pocket.
I agree.
So, Jackie, is that something that you have the wherewithal?
Yeah, we can find out from the school what portion we are, what they're.
Well, what portion we are, but at the same point in time, it is
Well-
based off of a median home. Of
Oh, yeah, once you find out what portion you are of their, the budget.
So
would-
per $1,000 of library expense, what does that translate to the aggregate?
So if I go home and look at my tax bill, I should be able to figure that, right? Yeah. The only thing that I couldn't figure is when I look at my tax bill, it says that the levy for the library was different than I thought it was gonna be, and I don't know why. I tried not to think too much about it.
Yes, it's when they take the revenue out, it came out to that other number.
No, I mean, it wasn't even, I'll have to find it.
Yeah.
And we'll come up with something.
Yeah, but my home's assessed value is, I think, not the median. It's,
Yeah, but if we
That's
take,
right.
yeah,
so I live.
if we take it and just.
You
say,
sort of
well,
got
that's
to,
that
that's something,
amount, so.
we sent around that American Home Study as part of the long-term, like this, so what's the median home value in Gilderland, and that should be here's what the average person is paying.
So on the reserves, we can definitely wait and build it into the budget, but then the next opportunity will be in the budget for the year ending 2025, right, June 2025. Or you could say, all of this has happened in the past, let's take a number and put it in our financial statements. So if someone looks at the financial statements, it does it.
I would say, because, we're gonna have pretty soon, in like 2 months or whatever, we're gonna be working on the budget for next year's budget.
Yeah.
So as part of that, it would be good if we had this in place. By the time we finish with that budget, we have these, the board designated reserves established, and then we can incorporate that into the budget for this year. And then it's a separate question about whether for all the past money that's sitting there in the reserves, whether we want to, allocate that between the things. That's like a separate question that we can deal with kind
Yeah.
of
I mean, we would be allowed to do that and put it in our financial statements.
okay.
Just,
I mean, because right now, with our current budget, so, I mean, do we have, the capital improvement line, we have that line in our budget this year, right? I mean, there was money,
yeah, I can't remember what it was, but I don't bring it. It was maybe 290,000, 248.
I want to say 230 myself, but.
Okay.
but somewhere in, yeah.
I normally just wait until June and put that number in.
That makes sense because it is like a number
It's
that's
just
just for, it's a balanced term there.
Yeah.
So, but, we could, kind of retroactively take
Yeah.
that figure and allocate it to those accounts once we've created them and just say, okay, well, we had this just in this, balance
okay.
term, but now that we've created these 3 reserve things, we can say, well, that 200 and whatever, we can kind of say, well, we're gonna attribute it to these 3
Yeah,
things.
yep, that's true.
But I don't see much of a difference for this year, since that money was already budgeted, it's already in there. That 230 versus the full 2 million or however much is just sitting in the fund balance. I mean, it's kind of all money that's already in the system. It's not money being budgeted going forward, so. And whether we do it specifically for this year or just kind of lump that in with all the money that's in there and decide what to do with it. I don't know, from my perspective, I don't know. But I think, I would love if we had those accounts in place by the time we are finishing this next budget so that we can kind of start to incorporate into the process and just kind of work on getting this all, it's just, part of this is just more transparency about, the money we're taking from the taxpayers. Why are we taking that money? What are we planning to use it for? What's the purpose for this? Kind of showing that to whatever extent we are able to project, what this is for. We're kind of,
I think some of this historical stuff is essential to show in that you just can't show it in that number, because everybody always wants a lower number. Okay, and to be able to show historically, we have used it this way, okay? And so what it really comes down to is this, is do you want to pay for capital capital programs out of the tax revenue, or do you want to do it out of the bond fund? Okay, because whatever we don't put in to this, we got to do on a bond fund. So the net of this is if this was bond finance, it would cost you this going forward on an ongoing basis versus putting it in effect, the library equity, which is this reserve fund. That's really what we're talking about if we have this type of a history of how do we spend this stuff? Because, I sort of want to know, is this $2 million number something that is just going to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow and grow, or does it go like this? And I think that's an important, really important piece of evidence on, because I have one answer to what you're saying, if it's going to grow and grow and grow. Because ultimately, this number could get to a point we say, for 1 year, we're not going to charge anybody in the whole school district. And then the next year, we're going to fund anything, we're going to have a 60% vote. It's going to require 60% to continue any type of budget. So that's basically what it comes down to. We sort of need, if we're going to have this type of discussion and do this, given the politics that are involved in budget referendums, we have to put this type of analysis on the table that fully tells the story about what the implication to the taxpayers is.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, I think one of the benefits of having this money designated in these specific, kind of separate fund lines, right? So we have these designated lines for that, is that will allow it to be easily tracked over time. We'll be able to just look at that one fund and have those numbers, exactly what you're talking about.
You may find a positive vote for me if we can make the case that this is the correct way to do it. If we don't know, I'm sort of like sitting in the, uncertainty about, do I want to put the school budget, at increased risk of 60% voting approval. So I may be with you, I may not be with you on this.
Well, I don't see, creating these board designated funds and kind of allocating our reserve issue to that seems to be a separate issue from whether we're taking the full tax levy or decreasing what we take. Because then sort of like I was saying, we could budget the exact same.
One, so I could know that it can't wander the tent, you start putting this in and then you get this other account and it raises all the same questions. So it's just like, how do you want to put a spotlight on this thing? And there's one way of doing it, setting up these funds and we can spotlight it that way and then start attacking this budget or else, we can get to, the next capital program and the whole issue just disappeared because the whole reserve fund just got sucked into the capital program because it was there. And everybody's sort of happy about that.
Yeah, I expect that's what we're gonna find. As time goes on, there'll be no shortage of capital improvements that can be made to the building.
And your salaries as well,
Right.
because you
salaries
already
will
has
go up.
3 more people coming in December, depending on how many more you add. So you haven't looked at that for that line yet, which is gonna decrease what your capital improvement line is gonna be going forward. So I think once you get to the end of this fiscal year, what we're gonna judge for the next budget will give you a better picture of how many employees you'll have now full-time and what that budget's gonna eat into there. It's definitely gonna go up because we've been operating under how many employees we normally have.
Yeah, cost of living.
Yeah,
year over
that
year,
as well.
It's always just gonna go up. It's
Yeah,
typically
July
go-
1st will be all the contracts hitting, so,
In 3 years from now, we'll have a new contract.
yeah.
So the library tax rate is only 0.9949%. So on a $400,000 house, it's $450.
What?
$450.
So I know, but what's $1,000 of expense? What's $1,000 of expense work to that? And that's the whole,
Divided by 1,000. So then,
No, that's just, I mean, that's based on like the house assessed value, right? Like
no, that's the so that's how much of somebody's assessed value of $400,000, their tax bill is gonna be $450 based on the library tax, and the school tax would be like $8,400.
okay, so we could figure it out this way then. So, what year is that based on?
2023, because I guess the 2024 one's probably not updated yet. Yeah, the
So-
2024 is not on there yet.
So if we took our entire tax levy for 2023 and then, and then said for a $400,000
The
house.
median house is not 400,000.
I have no idea what the median.
No.
Should be using the median house.
But I mean, well, that's fine. So well, the median house, we can just convert, from the, just instead, if a $400,000 house was about $450 that they're paying, then whatever we think the median is if it's, do we think it's 250? What do you use? I don't know what. But, let me just real quick.
The median listing price in October 2024 was $399,900.
So far,
That's why I said, I don't think it's wrong on median.
Yeah.
The 2010 census.
right. So.
You're back in the 90s on that one.
So we can just take that, so if it's that $450 figure, we can just divide that into our full budget for the year, our full tax levy for that year to find out like for every, dollar, basically or
June 30th, 2023,
yeah, what was our total tax levy?
4,164,265.
All right, so that's our total.
So
That's the total tax levy. And then, we want to find out for $1,000, how much it's gonna be. So if the total tax levy was 4,164,000, and that was equivalent to $450, then it's gonna be that, divided by 150 equals, so it's gonna be about $9.25 per $1,000 increase in the budget, if I did the math right, which.
We can double check it.
I don't know if I did.
it seems like too much.
No,
Yeah,
that's
what we
not right,
tried.
that's not right.
Seems like we should.
I must have missed the
There's a decimal missing.
450. Oh. All right, can you read me that tax levy number again?
Yep. 4,164,265.
Check. Hold on, I gotta do it again. 450. Sorry, 4134. What was it?
4,164,265.
All right, okay. That's a much better number. It's 11 cents.
Yeah.
Well, that wasn't a lot. That makes more
So
sense.
about $1 for 100,000.
Well-
I mean, it's
A
small.
$1 per 10,000.
Yeah, $250,000 worth 25.
What's that? Yeah, it's about a tenth, so it's 11%, so, yeah, so
Like $25.
if, a $250,000 increase in the budget will cost the median house $25 extra in taxes. So, yeah, I mean, it's small, relatively. Small.
So I think everybody just bear that in mind as we look at it, look at expenses and everything as to what it means. $400,000.
Makes sense too, of course. Close enough to 7%.
That's, that's at least the ballpark now, that gives us a number, so.
Okay. Other, I guess, outstanding things, so we're not gonna forget about that, we'll keep moving forward with that. Mike, the other thing from last meeting we had was, the credit card tracking, and did that ever come back, or did we ever?
So we've talked about that a little bit internally, and I had Jackie and David add some more notes to the check register
Yeah.
just to indicate when we, instead of saying credit card bill, we actually indicated some of the bigger ticket items that are in it, just to give a little more transparency.
Okay. And then, last thing is, do you have any numbers for the repair on the skylight? Just curious.
No, so, not to alarm anyone, but when we replaced it in 2008, it was $100,000 in
Yeah.
$2008, but we haven't heard yet. I actually added a couple of items to the agenda that are finance committee related. One of them is getting approval to move forward with BRMA to price out the skylight repair.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
So that'll be up for vote. I also asked for permission, I guess, to move ahead with having BRMA give us specs for the Norman Skill Room, the former cafe place, to price out what it would cost to maybe some options of how to change that room around. Related to that, a suggestion that I kicked around with the facilities committee and that I also, I'm happy to kick around with as well, or the full board, is if we want to consider a retainer for an architect, as opposed to bidding out architecture for every capital project we do. Maybe keeping BRMA or another firm on retainer. And then the other agenda item I added was the official vote on the Paycom change. I know this committee had approved us moving forward, so we did, but to give the board the full vote. But yeah, we went up on the roof and took a look at the skylight with one of the partners at BRMA. They were able to unstick, our sticking point was that we couldn't get any contractors to call us back. And the partner said, oh, I'll make some phone calls. And we had a contractor saying they'll come out and look at it next week. So moved some things along more efficiently.
That was nice.
Yeah.
It was in fact one of the contractors who ignored us, offered to come out and look, so.
Takes to know people.
Mhm.
Well, that's everything that I have now, so unless there's anything else. No? Right, I guess we can adjourn then if everybody. Okay, good. The next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, the 17th, before our meeting on the 19th. So I don't know if that works for people, we'll keep it. If it doesn't, then you might have to reschedule it, but
It's okay with me.
it is okay. I won't be at the next board meeting on the 18th, though, so I'll be here on the 17th.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, I will be away then.